Two buses, filled with members from the Seminole tribe of Florida, are beginning a journey back in time to relive a moment that occurred 160 years ago. There are 5 reservations in all in South Florida, crisscrossing the peninsula from Atlantic to Gulf. Seminoles have come from all of them to be a part of the historic commemoration that is going to take place in Charleston Harbor at the tiny 19th century fortification called Fort Moultrie. It was there that 200 of their ancestors were taken as prisoners early in 1838. And it was there that one of the most famous of all Seminole war leaders, known to the outside world as Osceola, ended his fight forever.
The celebration part of this whole entire trip is the fact that the people who fought and died there in Florida and who went to Fort Moultrie as prisoners were fighting to keep their people in Florida. The people who are on these buses are the descendants of those Seminoles, and they remained in Florida, and their success is being symbolized by this trip.
Throughout 1836 and 1837, the forces of the U.S. military pursued the Seminoles through the thickets, forests, and swamps of Florida's vast interior. Volunteers, both black and white, men of every nationality, regular soldiers and officers, grizzled veterans and young graduates straight from West Point, endured the scorching heat and privations in search of an enemy who struck and melted away like the pounding late summer rains. Osceola's image was enlarged with every battle and soldier's letter home. He was intelligent, handsome, an elegant dresser, and an eloquent and passionate speaker. In the eyes of U.S. citizens, many of whom sympathized with the plight of the Indians, he quickly became the symbol of everything that the Seminoles were fighting for. For almost 2 years, Osceola and the Florida resistance fighters hid out in the swamps and hammocks of the interior, constantly on the move to avoid capture. It became impossible to trust anyone, Indian or slave, because at any moment they might be captured and forced, at gunpoint, to betray the hiding places of the rest. Mothers were terrified lest a baby should cry out and give away their positions. The moon was barely a silvery new sliver on the night of November 29, 1837. For 4 days, the Indians had feigned sickness, and a few had been allowed outside the fort, under guard, to search for herbs to make medicine. The white soldiers had no idea what kind of medicine they were making.
Quite a few of the Seminoles were imprisoned here, and a majority of them were imprisoned inside the room where you can see the window directly here, where the escape was supposed to have been made from. And that would have been Cowackachee and Thomas Hodjo, according to Cowackachee himself. But according to the official military records, 18 others did escape with those, including 2 of those being female.
Wildcat, who loved to tell a good tale, especially to the gullible white people, later told reporters that the Indians had tied strips of their bedding together and climbed out through the narrow gun-port slit high up in the wall of their room. But the memory of their escape from the old Spanish fort on that dark, cold night has been preserved differently by the Seminoles. Many say that the prisoners escaped by making powerful war medicine and enveloping themselves in a fog so they could march right out through the Sallyport gate past the dazed white soldiers.
He was told by his grandfather that some of the Seminoles that were still on the grounds that were not captured they came to the fort and they dug the holes in the wall and they climbed to the window, and then they had special medicine to be done so that the bars can be loosened. So that's how they made their escape. And a long time ago, as these were written by non-Indian, the story has changed over the years, and that he's always been told that to keep the truth and to keep it going and to keep it alive.
Osceola's historical reach would far exceed the short span of his life and even the terrible years of the Seminole Wars. His last wishes that his body should be returned to Florida, where his bones could rest in peace, went largely ignored. Certainly, it would be more than a century before his kinfolk in Florida would be in a position to exercise any kind of control over the question of his remains. But tradition requires that those remains should be whole and intact before Osceola can be returned to his Florida home. As for his spirit, the Seminole people do not believe that a spirit comes back once it has crossed over to the west, to the land where all spirits go. But perhaps Osceola's spirit has not yet gone away. Perhaps he continues to fight for his people as they, in turn, continue to remember and to honor him.